In this presentation, I will be talking about how the reading process is very much like a road trip. So when you plan for a road trip, how far you travel would determine how you plan for it. So let's get an example. Let's say that you're planning a trip out to Palm Springs. So some things to think about when planning for a road trip to Palm Springs. It's only about an hour drive from LA, so you'll likely make it there and back in one gas tank unless you do a lot of driving when you get there. So you know that your trip to Palm Springs is going to be short. It's going to be a short drive. So you may not have to worry about getting tired while you're driving. So you don't need coffee or anything to keep you up. And with such a short drive out from LA to Palm Springs, you could probably do the trip in one day and you may not need to find lodging. So these are all important things to consider when you're planning for your road trip, especially to one like Palm Springs. Now, let's look at the second example though. Let's say you're planning a road trip to New York, specifically New York City, and that's from LA to New York. So if you actually go on Google Map, it tells you that it would take you about 41 hours to get from LA to New York. And most of us will not be able to drive 41 hours straight safely. So what does that mean? Well, are you going to plan the same way as you were planning when you were going to go to Palm Springs? Absolutely not. So how would you plan differently? What are some things that you would do differently knowing that your road trip to New York is much longer than your road trip to Palm Springs? So what does this have to do with reading? What's my point? See, the reading process is like a road trip. See, depending on how much text you have to read and what kind of text you are reading is going to determine how you plan to tackle the reading assignment. So let's look at some example. Let's say you decide you're going to pick up the magazine Rolling Stone and read an article from it. Most of you will just turn to the page of the article and you're just going to start reading. And you will most likely be done with the article within 10 minutes. See, this type of reading, it's like your short trips, road trips to Palm Springs. It doesn't really require a whole lot of preparation, and you don't need to plan extensively. Now, what if you had a different reading assignment? And let's say this time you need to read chapter 4 of your psychology textbook. Now, this is not your trip to Palm Springs. And if you're talking about a whole chapter, this sort of feels like that road trip to New York. So most of you will find this reading selection very difficult to get through, just like driving in New York is going to be a bit challenging with 41 hours on the road. So with reading chapter 4 of your psychology book, you're going to know that it's going to be long. It has a lot of unknown vocabulary words, and the author probably uses complex sentence structures. So with these types of readings, you're like that long road trip and you need to plan, and you need a plan to get through this reading. So this is where we go into the reading process. You see, the reading process helps us decide what kind of plan and how we're going to use, and then how we're going to get through the reading so that at the end we understand what we just read. So there are 3 steps and phases to the reading process. There is step 1, the pre-reading, step 2, during reading, and step 3, after reading. And there's going to be another video in your assignment that's going to go into some strategies and skills for each of these steps. But right now, I just want you to sort of understand and have a brief, simple understanding of what each step is asking you to do. In the pre-reading stage, it's really asking, what do good readers do before they pick up a text to read? You need to look at your text, skim and scan, and decide, what kind of plan do I need to tackle this? Is this a simple read like that article in the Rolling Stone magazine? Or is this a much more complex read? And if it is, how am I going to tackle that? And then when you read these texts, okay, during reading, What do good readers do to stay focused and retain comprehension as they read? Well, for some texts, you don't have to do a whole lot to stay focused, especially if it's a short article in a magazine. When you're reading a whole chapter, it's like driving 41 hours on the road. How are you going to stay up? What are you going to do to make sure you get to the end? So how are you going to stay focused to get through chapter 4 in your psychology textbook? What kind of things are you going to put in place to help you understand what the author is trying to say? And then finally, the last stage in reading, in the reading process, is what do good readers do to help them gain more in-depth understanding of what they had just read? And how do good readers organize all the information that they've just read now that they've read everything? And so there are some skills and strategies and things that you will learn in this class that will help you in each of these steps. And the video that you'll be watching for this assignment will also give you some simple and ready to use strategies for each of these steps in the reading process.